Gray dawn lifts over the channel. Gulls skid the chop as if shoved by a hidden hand. On the headland, steel towers rise like ribbed spires, guy wires singing, insulators beaded with salt. In the hut below, a green trace sweeps and sweeps. At the rim, a faint smear appears at an absurd range, a whisper where sky kisses water. The operator's hand hesitates, then moves, pencil to pad, pad to phone, because a thin line now becomes a mass later, and the gap is measured in minutes nobody can buy back. The phone tree snaps awake. Cords bite into jacks, bells chatter, voices go clipped and calm. Dover to filter, Forness to filter. Pevensey listening, bearings in degrees, range ticks, altitude estimates with a shrug baked into them. High-frequency beams on the 20 meg band throw echoes from heights eyes cannot hold. Inland aerials report comparative strength, lobe-switching giving steps up the sky. If the estimate is wrong by 3,000 feet, a squadron climbs into blank air and spends the only climb it can afford. Inside Bentley Priory's filter room, a wide table is linen surf with chalked circles and lettered sectors. WAAF plotters in headsets push colored counters with rakes, time marks flipping every 2 minutes, red to yellow to blue to red again, so a mist of numbers becomes a moving intent. Sector to sector, noise hardens into track lines. A room invents depth from dots. The senior man at the corner, face ash with lost sleep, sees a whisper from Dover with a blip from Rye, and form a line angled at Kent. He lifts a hand to the controller's phone, because to save fighters you have to spend them exactly on the minute. At Biggin Hill, the sector controller stands above a calm-looking board that is anything but. He listens to Priory like a chess player, taking a hint from behind a curtain, then lifts VHF to his pilots with a voice that hides its math. Scramble, but measured. One squadron now, one at 5-minute readiness, because fuel isn't breath you can borrow back, and every turn on the ground is a turn you won't burn in the climb. He gambles against throwing everything at the first shape, because the second shadow is the one that empties a field. On wet grass strips, hurricanes swivel like straining dogs. Spitfires raise sharp noses. Props bite damp light. Wheels thump free of earth. The controller counts their turn. Come right to 085. Now. Now. Climb to Angels 20. VHF is clean. The newer set lacks the old HF mush, and orders land in cockpits with the authority of a hand on a shoulder. The pilots see only pale sky hardening to blue. What they have been given is minutes, and minutes grow height. A plotter's rake glides a red counter across linen, matching outer rings to the tick-tick of the time clock. Strength uncertain, the tag says, but the footprint widens into confidence. Return strong but variable, altitude climbing, then settling. Bombers with heavy cover? She repeats numbers from an earpiece alive with clatter. Dover says 50 plus. Lobe suggests Angels 15 climbing. She adds a tiny pencil notch meaning more than reported. A miss here sends men over empty water. She listens again, knuckles white on the rake. Sunlight skims the top of shredded overcast. The channel is hammered silver. The Luftwaffe Gruppe leader rides that light, thinking in triangles and timing, yesterday's resistance tempered by a new plan. Let the main mass take the obvious path and pull the defenders up. Then slip the edge outside the beams, low and late, where spray eats signal and the coast stares at a blank that moves. He calculates British recovery speed and underestimates it, but sea clutter is on his side, a gray carpet that hides footsteps. Priory's filter team threads more voices into one. Chain home stations along the coast feed a picture that starts to make sense. A main grouping stepping toward Dungeness, an escort high and ahead, and maybe something else under Confidence's horizon. The night's cooling left a duct for signals to slide too far, a phantom inland echo that could be a ghost. The senior filter officer marks it light and warns sectors to temper their climb. Don't burn the bank on mirage. He passes the shape to Biggin Hill with a circle and a question mark. Biggin's controller reads the board like a gambler reading tells. The high rate justifies an intercept at 20,000. But the notch in the plotter's line, the uncertain low return, hints at a feint or a shadow hugging the surface. He puts Spitfires on the obvious ladder to height and holds Hurricanes a minute longer at Angels 10 on a vector angled to guard the river. 2 doors to guard, 1 spare key. The lock you don't cover is the one someone boots. Down the coast, the receiving hut becomes a seam of sound. Hash rises like wind in thorns, then thins as an operator flicks a dial by feel. Someone is throwing noise, a rough blanket across the band to blur edges and smear peaks. It won't blind them, not yet, but it steals certainty. Frequency discipline saves what can be saved. Stick to agreed channels, utter bearings once, don't fill silence with speculation. The picture holds together by restraint alone. If it breaks, the board turns abstract, and abstract kills. First intercept angles sketch over the chalk line of coast, contrails scribbling invisible decisions. Spitfires level at the right height, almost. The controller trims seconds. 2 degrees left, a metronome voice. A wedge of dark dots miles out is about to stop being dots and turn into geometry and speed. The section leader warns his men about the sun. The Germans are in bad light for surprise. It looks clean, but the Biggin roster shows only what can be committed now. There's a hole low over the water. Pins sprout where nervous chalk was, and a hand draws a line for presumed escort above the main block. Farnborough's notes on German patterns sit under a paperweight, but no one needs paper to guess. Fighters up front and above, bombers steady, a second group hanging back to bounce climbers. The room is quieter than at dawn. Breath comes through headsets. A runner arrives with tea no one touches, because everything on the board happens in 2 minutes, and tea cools slower than that. Along the cliff, the array operator notes a dip. The main smear holds. Returns that looked like flies vanish from the scope's lower edge. The sea's gray smother is a wall of false return. Anything riding the waves becomes rumor. Low fighter bombers could be skimming the backwash, and Chainhome is near-sighted at ankle height. She flips a toggle to relay what she has to Chainhome low sets tucked closer to shore, where the sky is measured with a different ruler. Inside an observer corps post, a man with binoculars hears engines like bees behind a door. He calls in height by ear, a count by pattern against cloud, because his best tools beyond glass are his memory and a pencil. His report trickles along a wire that happens to still be intact, and the filter room stitches human line to steel echo. The gaps tie with thread that can snap. Biggin's controller forces himself to breathe slow as another line lands. Does he pull the second squadron down to meet a low report that might not be real and ruin his high wall? Weather draws a scudding band across Kent and Sussex that can hide or lie, and ducting has already sent at least one ghost inland. If the low track evaporates, he wastes his last easy minutes. He asks Chainhome low for confirmation, 5 choking seconds of hiss. Then a trained voice brings numbers from a mobile set tucked near shingle. 30 plus, low, fast, hugging the sea, bearing to the river mouth. The room changes pitch, breath let out too slowly turned into a word. The controller nods, calls off the second squadron's hold. They level and angle toward a gray line they cannot see. He knows they'll be low on fuel at the far edge of this, but low on fuel is better than not arriving. On the German side, the leader checks his watch and watches the escort dip to meet the climbing specks. His plan is a bolt. Draw defenders up and forward, then swing low through the hinge. He sent a finger along the coast to pull a sector's gaze wrong. He expects British radios to be muddy. He does not know VHF has turned noises into numbered steps. Phones erupt as the first contacts confirm, humid voices drafted into routine. The filter room updates strength estimates and finally labels main in fat pencil and prob in thinner. Time markers cycle, red counters replaced by yellow at the 2-minute beat, color aging plot. A young plotter mishears and pushes a counter too far. Another hand corrects without breaking step. Mistakes here cause jogs out there. She swallows shame and repeats bearing louder, slower. The other end repeats clean. Wind picks up, a squall line ripping toward the coast and changing air's texture. Skip plays tricks, signals sliding along layers. One station sees too much, one none. Filtering, human and electrical, sifts truth from skip. The room develops a feel for which masts lie, under which skies. They adjust waiting like bookmakers under shifting odds. The picture firms enough to lay trap lines. Chalk risks ink. At Biggin Hill, the intrusive thought, the airfield, not just the board, is a target. Sandbags against the ops window feel suddenly small if someone chooses to aim here. He pushes the thought away. You cannot defend the board and move pieces if you stare at sandbags. He orders spare boards turned out, a secondary plotting map with pins and ribbon ready if the main shutters. If a bomb cuts the trunk, runners will carry orders and field lines will sing in hedgerows. At altitude, Spitfires catch light and swing as one on the controller's last now. The escort is there, as expected. Shapes grow wings and crosses. The map turns into separate stories. Below, the lower track remains numbers and a line trending toward the river with too few British machines to meet it clean. The jamming that was a smear grows teeth, a howl that turns voice to wool. A receiving operator drops a notch filter, another nudges gain. The sea's roar shrinks. The network absorbs the shove, returns sharpen. Somewhere, someone experiments with foil strips, but here it's mostly noise. The British reply is simple. Say less, say once, say numbers. Seconds by climbs. Climbs by ambush. The low group nudges the board's edge. The controller counts arithmetic against a ledger eroding by fuel. Squadrons aloft have 30 to 40 minutes of hard work before fuel jerks them home. He schedules rotation in his head, tries to leave no gap. Launch a fresh pair to backfill the low intercept, and they'll be late for the first swing and early for the second unless the Germans are slow. Hold them, and he stares down emptiness later. He decides to hold, then changes his mind on a breath. Biggin's board shows 2 red blocks now, high and low, paths diverging like forked lightning. Noise dips to near silence as eyes fix on the split that matters more than any number. The controller hovers over the hotline to a neighbor, because if he guesses wrong, the neighbor will wear the weight of his mistake in fresh craters. A phone rings with a third, smaller report. A decoy? A stray? As the 2 red blocks separate clean. In the filtered silence at Priory, pins scrape linen and time discs flip yellow to red as the split goes official. Track 1 high, strong, Angels 20, and climbing. Track 2, low, weak, hugging Sussex. A finger taps the clock. A pencil ticks fuel in the margin. Dowding's eyes move from board to phones and back, measuring minutes like blood in a body that can't afford a cut. He nods. Sector lines light with orders before his voice leaves. At Biggin Hill, the controller bites through a pencil. Squadron leader, scramble. Black section to Angels 20, steer 085. Yellow section, hold low, vector the river. The WAAF beside him splits counters, chalk arcs tightening around London. On the set, a pilot reads back with a clipped breath. The board shows 10 minutes to reach 20,000. The high block approaches at 3 miles a minute. She slides the high counter 2 inches. 2 minutes lived. Upstairs, the trace already fades under glare. Steel towers hum with their own weather and throw pulses into haze. On a bench, an operator flips the lobe switch, listening for deeper throb that means height. Today, the sea argues. The low return wobbles with spray. The high sates almost too sharp, as if taller than truth. She calls both. Probable angels 5 for low, 20 for high. But there's an edge in probable. Urgency grows as confidence thins along the wire. Switchboards chatter. Priory filter, affirm both tracks, strength A on upper, C on lower. Repeat, C on lower. In the filter room, arcs from Dover, Rye, Pevensey fold into a seam. A pencil writes, "Feint?" and then scratches it out as a third report confirms the low track's persistence. A calm voice repeats, "Controllers, maintain split. Do not commit reserves yet." Orange tubes glow across HQ. The net keeps talking under strain. The high squadron lifts like silver fish, wheels tucking as they hit sun. "Turn now. Now. Climb to Angels 20, the controller says, a metronome for a dance he conducts by shadow and guess. Vector 085, bandits 12 o'clock, level. The leader glances at fuel and does the math backwards. 10 minutes climb, 5 to overshoot if he misses, 30 total before bingo. He doesn't look down. The board must look for him. Below, another flight holds low over the Thames, the river a black ribbon where bridges spine the city. Yellow section, hold, new heading 130, don't climb. The WAAF's rake pushes their red slugs along the chalked river. She's young enough to imagine flicking them back into safety. She doesn't. She listens for the coastal hut that can tell her where the low return went when it chose to play the channel's gleam like a friend. Behind dunes at Rye, chain home low squats, steel, canvas, and a dog that hates the generator. Their scope is fat green sorrow, everything and nothing near waterline. An operator with oil up her wrists from an earlier fuse swap leans in. There, fleas on the edge of the sea return, weak but moving. Low track confirmed, bearing 090, speed 250, Angels 3, she tells the line. Her voice rides hum and hiss to Priory, then to sector with no time lost to doubt. It's enough. One last-minute turn steers the hunt to the river mouth instead of an empty bay. The German leader watches surf thread under his left wing and smiles at the English towers, pointing the wrong way, he thinks, tall masts searching for gods while men hug the sea. Escorts are high, fat with confidence. The brief said the English talk too much. He hears only clean bursts. He dips his hand. The formation lowers 2 meters, more ink on water. His plan is a braid, set a shadow in the sky, and slide bone below. On Biggin's map, high counters reach the contact line. Black section, bandits 12 o'clock, slightly above. Tally? Tally! Engaging! In the glassless window, sound arrives late. Chains dropped on tin, the roll of engines slamming air. The WAAF slides their counter into a combat wedge instead of a bar. A margin note, fuel pulse 112 used. She dislikes the low track being only a rumor they chose to believe. She holds the rumor anyway. Fog rises off the channel, a cold breath sanding edges. The low blips smear on CH low, the set fights chop that looks like a squadron that isn't. The coastal operator has learned the rhythm of boats and birds. This isn't either. Low track adjusting, bearing 110 speed, increased. Priory tells Biggin the back door is the door today. Commit 2 sections, they say. The word is careful, not 3, not yet. At Kenley, a trunk line clicks and dies. Bombs cut a relay station some clerk could name, and one plotting hut's landline turns silent. A runner dives under trees with a message board strapped to his chest. Sussex plots go stale by 4 minutes, then 5. Biggin swears and guesses. Yellow section, turn 110 now, Angels 3, expedite. He's gambling south and the WAAF knows it. She writes guess S on the board and circles twice. Up high, black section hits the bomber's square, out of sun, a wedge unseen. Geometry? Doubting promised becomes motion, height becomes speed, surprise turns passes into fire. A Heinkel peels with a wing on flame, escorts drop late. It works. This part works when the board's right. The pilot thinks this could be all if not for fuel's itch and the knowledge that something sneaks under the deck toward the river. The German leader notes the bait taken and gives a tiny nod. He doesn't need to beat high fighters, just pin them. He orders hell onto British ears. The operator obliges. Over Kent, on bands the Germans guess at, a comb of noise pours gravel into every sentence. It isn't refined. It's enough to choke seconds. Biggin's controller tightens squelch, narrowing the gate until the hash thins and words stand up again. Perhaps first time, perhaps practiced unseen. Either way, he won't let his voice shake. Skip adds its own lie. A spike pings a phantom over Reading, strong and wrong. A trainee pushes a new counter and gets checked by a flat palm. 2 inland stations report empty skies and church bells. The phantom is erased. A scramble saved, fuel left for real work. The map looks nonsense for a breath, counters on counters, some bright, some fading. But the pattern holds. Maintain split, the voice says. The WAAF realizes she trusts tone as much as words. Down on water, a fishing mast flickers and is thrown aside. Fighter bombers ride clutter like an alley full of carts. Shadows double and chop. The tall towers were never built to look here. Smaller sets and cliff eyes do it at the edges of competence. An observer post on chalk with a wireless sends, "Low, many, Hastings to Pevensey, heading inland." It sounds like a prayer. It arrives like a rope tossed to someone in surf. Yellow hears Hastings and turns before the controller repeats. "Confirm Hastings, Angels 3, heading 120, he says, hiding relief. The WAAF drags counters around the coastline's chalk. Make speed. Do not climb. He can feel pilots resisting instinct to gain safety. The river curls ahead. The Germans intend to follow it into the city like a finger on a map. A German operator tries a new trick. Not noise, a sweep, a wandering tone. British ears are drilled. A young pilot loses a heading breath. "Turn now, now," the controller says, sliding orders between sweeps like coins under a door. In Biggin's room, a window rattles. A distant blast shakes grit down. The WAAF doesn't flinch. She moves counters, coughs, keeps time. A spare board is dragged nearer. They'll change maps between storms if they must. High fighters call fuel and ask vectors home. The controller does arithmetic and sends them to a field he hopes still has a runway. He waits a counted beat, then gives Yellow the word they've held for, engage. Bandits 11 o'clock, slightly below. There's relief disguised in engage. On the board, their counters slant to dogfight. Fuel clock for Yellow spins faster than ink. Back at the low hut, the operator hears the sea become an ocean that isn't any sea. German jamming wanders near the low band and blankets more than voices. She turns the dial one way, then the other, drops a notch filter a signals officer insisted on last week, and the ocean becomes a shore again. Edges thin, but there. She screams bearing and altitude into the phone like calling into a gale. Fuel cuts every decision. Noon has been busy all week. The second wave likely forms over Calais already. Reserves are thin. One returning flight is told to land further north to open Biggin's pattern. Another told to orbit 1 minute more at Angels 12, gambling that a shape will show before he commits them and burns their last climb in the wrong place. The WAAF circles orbit, chalk squeals. The German leader orders his low thrust to jink, pairs and threes to muddle plots. Confusion works. Some British arrive above nothing. Some chase threads. but some are walked around an unseen corner and come through it onto a Stuka whose pilot chose certainty over caution. Ambush still lives in discipline. Weather throws a curtain. Over Kent, a shower drags and fattens returns with rain rather than aluminum. An inland station calls correction. No, weather. Time spent on the call is time the board can't give back. The WAAF marks the squall with crooked blue chalk. She leaves a thumbprint by London, and on her skirt she won't remember making. In a radio truck under trees near the sector station, a signals officer tests 3 ideas. He scribbles and crosses out, then flips a switch to open a frequency a shade off the main and whispers to a single flight, a hedge if the next wave brings noise he can't notch. It's ad hoc, not doctrine, necessary. Someone bangs on the truck. Priory on. Hold for orders. Priory is cooler now despite the bustle. Doubting keeps his hands off counters. Touch makes you part of enactment. London's reprieve so far rides on boys obeying a woman's voice and chalk lines and on not climbing when every nerve wanted to. Tell Biggin to expect the second wave. Keep Kenley on fallback circuit. Don't leave the river door empty. Someone else puts it to wire. The masts throw pulses at a sky that keeps trying to be unreadable. In engine rooms under towers, men in denim haul levers and curse a spindle bearing running hot in afternoon glare. Power hiccups would blind the net. The generator coughs, then sings. Upstairs, paper strips align, minute marks crisp. The net holds, the weave frays, they feel Luftwaffe fingers at the hems. High fighters clear sky with escort, chase a smudge toward water. Fuel now, their only escort. Break off, RTB, land at Debden, not home. He cuts his sentence before the next band of noise. He will need them in an hour if the day keeps liking itself. He won't have them if they chase pride to coast. The WAAF flips black section's disk to white, 5 then 10 minutes before dots are safely assumed. Until then, they're ghosts crossing a net, guessing where safe begins. Over the Thames, yellow drives fragments of the low raid off cranes and barges, then peels to fields that look quiet enough to land. Behind, a few German bombs walk themselves into water. The city exhales, almost audible to those watching the map. Reprieve is counted in minutes and petrol. It must be banked against the next order. The controller rolls his shoulders. Grit grinds. He touches the board's worn lip and thinks of Kenley's deadline and how signals turn to silence. Then headsets erupt. Not a crude howl, a broad shaggy blanket across the band. On screens, points smear, the neat stair-step of Echo's fogs. At the coast, the operator hears her own pulse before pulses from the mast. The WAAF's hand hangs over the board, counterpoised with nowhere to go. For a breath that stretches, the net gropes around its own blindness. Did the net just go blind? In the hut by the sea, the room becomes a single noise, dense hiss boiling in the cans, drowning the time-based tick. The green line sweeps, faithful and blind. Echoes melt into undergrowth, a storm of dots that won't resolve. Fingers find gain, back off, flip lobe switch. The beam slides, mush sharpens, then smears. Hold cadence, do not repeat, bearing only, the switchboard shouts. The smear at range splits into several, one group torn open by interference, or 3 claws reaching inward. Up at Biggin Hill, the controller leans into the mic, knuckles white, and counts through static like a teacher in a storm. Angels 20, steer 090. Now. Squadrons that lifted clean vanish into scratch and clipped replies. VHF carries better than HF, but even discipline can't cut pure hash. He splits himself, high patrol south of London, low guard to the river mouth, a flight on 5-minute readiness he's not sure he can burn. Fuel clocks tap across the room. Wait, and the raid crests unopposed. Launch, and there's nothing left for the next knock. Priory's map is a patient under jittery anesthetic. They trained for this, Noise jamming was in the paragraphs, so they fall back to shape and speed over brightness. 3 coastal stations, 1 inland, cliff observers. The filter sergeant calls for lobe-B comparison without looking up. If strength fluctuates with switching rather than distance, jam acknowledged. If not, weather. On cloth, a plotter flips countercolor to the minute in progress, a tight rule that keeps time from smearing with signals. Her hand hesitates, turn or seize breath, then nudges the red disc half an inch and draws a line she hopes is true. Over the channel, the Luftwaffe leader smiles without knowing. Escorts slide snug at 10 meters, where sea return is a gray wall for distant ears. He drilled this: a decoy at 20,000 to pull the first intercept, a main body ducking into waves, late climb under coast where towers can't bend quickly. He checks his watch, glances at his wing, imagines an English room holding its breath, unable to separate spray from metal. Come late and his bombers cross the cliffs with speed. Come early and British fuel boils away in spirals. At the coast, the operator lifts one ear cup to listen to wind through wallboard. The wind is wrong, burrowing from southeast, and the masts thrum like strings in a bad haul. Ducting. A temperature layer makes the beam hug sea and then skip inland. That's the ghost maker. Fighters from France appearing over Kent in traces before crossing, a bomber echo blooming as if over the downs. She marks ghosts with grease pencil and calls Priory to discount until confirmed. The discipline to doubt your machine keeps squadrons from chasing reflections to exhaustion. Static breathes. Operators learn its rhythm and ride the troughs. Between, strength numbers peak, unfirm, enough to shape. A low mass flares over sea, a thin procession farther north, likely the faint. Chain home low, further down the coast, fills the ear with a human voice relaying human eyes. Low shapes real, speed high. Riders at mast height, heading Dungeness. At Biggin, a plotter drags a yellow counter along the riverline in 2-minute jumps. A partner writes 270 knots, alt 50 to 100 feet. Unknown strength, underlined twice. The map is alive again, imperfect and persuasive. On the field, hurricanes lift toward glare that turns the channel to a blade. Turn now, now, climb 10, keep sun, the controller says. He listens for each acknowledgement, subtracts those lost to scratch, and thinks in edges. If the high squadron hits decoy clean, altitude converts to kills. If low fighters find only sea, they burn fuel and fast bombers run on concrete, not chalk. The hard order is to ignore shadows until coast posts confirm crossing. It means letting fear of what you can't see sit in your throat. A phone on his left dies mid-sentence. A bomb on a wire. A tree down. The why is irrelevant. Backups were imagined into the room's bones. Field lines, runners. A corporal is already under the board rerouting through a second trunk via Uxbridge. Delay measured in the time a hand hovers. Every pause is distance traveled by men with bombs. Seconds weigh the way petrol weighs. The German leader flashes a signal. Thin bundles drop. Foil cut, near quarter wavelength. Not widely used, tested enough. A smear blooms on one sector's set, gluing a filter officer's attention for 2 minutes. The operator recognizes flutter, not white noise. He slants his lobe, listening to catch returns when the jam swings away. Half values, scribbled in a column. Maintain track, maintain bearing, strength unassessed. Ugly, workable. Observer Corps, posts along Kent, pull tin helmets down and call. The old bones breathe when the machine stutters. Volunteers read shapes by exhaust stain, by sit on the air. Single engine, low, fast, many. Switchboard at Priory lights as if someone poured water onto a fuse box. Out of the flood, the real track congeals. Low, thick, climbing late. Biggin's line blinks, restored mid-buzz. He shifts disposition in one breath. High flight. Continue to bait. Don't chase past river. Low flight, swing north 10 degrees, hold 60 seconds, climb to Angels 5, blow through, don't get tied. He keeps a sliver of reserve despite pressure from north. He thinks in triangles, sun, gleam, fall angles, home with enough in tanks. Margins break things, not centers. The edge keeps moving. Over fields, the first clean ambush blooms. The decoy real enough to kill, but met at number. Altitude becomes speed. First pass tiers 2 bombers white. RT is a hammock of static. He infers success by plot hesitations, not words. High sky is noisy and good. Main danger stays low. Down slope, the low track swells, rising to clear cliffs, flattening into CH Low's best lobe. The radar here was an afterthought. Today, it's hinge. They call the altitude low as they dare, with a 1,000-foot tolerance that is life or death in a dive. The controller adds 1,000 to peak over glare. Wrong, and they scrape into flak. Right, and they see shadows an instant earlier. The WAAF at the map is tired and not permitted to be. Colors flip on time, red, yellow, blue, and altitudes are chalked with sure hand, while her ear misses half a call and replaces it with educated guess. A wrong call spell emptiness at the wrong height, and height equals time, and time equals fuel. The room smells hot and metallic, chalk dust and ozone, as if the map were an engine under load. At the coast, the German leader meets revelation. The trap is not only height, it's timing. He drew one squadron up and sent the other hunting shadows, and still out of sun to starboard, another wedge arrives, preserved by an economy he didn't count on. He expected the English to chase every echo until their tanks dried. Instead, their coldness buys fresh ambush. He curses. Even if he walks bombs across concrete today, these people will have a net tomorrow. The squall hits as bombs fall from racks, dumping rain onto the southern map. Water makes lace in radar. Glitter, fattened returns, small aircraft lost in milky refraction. For a minute, CH pulses read like a sheet of tin tossed into air. Filtering returns to craft, throw out 2 perfect lines, trust slight irregularities. An older operator tells the new one not to believe weather that looks like math. Certainty clawed out of maybe. The German stream splits again, a late dislocation wicked even without interference. Half the fighters sag low for cover, half slither high to repel ghosts from the sun. Exactly what the British wanted. Split escorts can't cover height and path. The controller orders his low flight through. Do not dogfight. Instinct denied hurts like biting your own lip. High, his men take long passes. Speed conserved, each run a minute, each minute a quarter inch of chalk. A siren rips Biggin's throat. The sector station is not unknown. Sticks burst beyond the perimeter, 1 short, 3-step across the field. Sandbags jump, glass scythes into the map. Counters rattle across floorboards. The WAAF keeps a hand on a disc as chalk shivers, then drags a spare cloth out, unrolls grid over grit, pins reseated. A tarp goes over the now empty window to keep wind from flipping plans into chaos. Another line goes thin. Not radio, telephones to a coastal station, cut by blast or luck. The corporal reroutes a field phone into the system, mouth moving while his ears ring. A bicycle leans in the corner. Someone may ride orders down a lane. The controller does not sit. He moves 3 pegs himself while the plotter resets, violating protocol to save seconds. Outside, ground crew throw flat, then up, pushing foam to a leaking Bowser, shoving a damaged Hurricane by its wingtips. The chalk under a wing reading tally smears under a boot. Tallies can be written again. Fighters come in hot, landings they don't want, because fuel needles are enemies you can see. They roll, turn, gulp petrol, and go, rotation not elegant, but brutal enough to keep air over the county full. Priory hears the bomb report and splits flow. A neighbor sector is spooled to take control if Biggin drops. Their map absorbs extra load, like a river takes a tributary. Teleprinters copy twice. Doubting watches, bowls spin, and orders nothing that would upset any. Preserve fighters, preserve nodes. Wars are fought with structure. Structures bend if you feed them. The jamming thins as the German leader calls dives. The trick did its work. On shore, needles turn honest. Honest but crowded, low-level fighters ride clutter, indistinguishable from waves. The marriage of old and new pays again. Observer posts near the river chant, "Over." Blue discs cross chalk coastline. Suddenly real. British fighters go in on the vector given a minute before the bomb. They are not quite right on height, and in that not quite lies the drama. Climbing through glare eats seconds, and seconds are what bombers own between cliff and concrete. Eyes become instruments ground cannot be. Voices go monosyllabic. The controller, back on his feet in a room of blown glass, says almost nothing. Talking now steals action. German bombs fall, not yet on London. Some go wide. Some walk afield toward empty dispersals. One tears a hard-stand corner into rope and wire. Two make fountains in soft ground. It isn't luck alone. Timing whittled by radar became angles that pulled escorts off their perfect lines. They still hit, something always does, and a hangar corner goes. But the station still speaks. The board still has cloth, singed at the edge. Then the thing that shouldn't fail, fails. The main trunk from Biggin to Priory goes dark with a click louder than blast. The backup is loaded from the first break. The field phone is too thin. The teleprinter is too slow. The controller is deaf to the wider picture. He has eyes and a small map and speech fragments. Plots go stale at the rate the German leader changes his mind. Disastrous. The corporal cannot splice a trunk with pliers and prayer in a minute. Neighbor sectors offer and demand. Hornchurch moves to absorb if needed. Absorption is lag. Lags are where bombers live. The WAAF who dragged the spare board now runs two, current and contingency, right-hand pushing pegs for Biggin, left marking same tracks on a handoff map. Her eyes water from dust and the need to blink. Half these counters are lives. Half are a test of whether the system can keep its promise. Outside, the German leader sees a different airfield and smoke and flak, near value. He can't see the map or wires. He doesn't know his blow-numbed, not paralyzed. He presses. His fuel is math and the channel hard. He thinks this run perhaps one more. He hasn't learned the British have fuel clocks burnt into their bones and rotate to refuse his schedule. A burst shakes the room. The landline's sound snaps back like a spine. The filter room's picture restreams as their own windows tremble with someone else's blast. At the coast, the operator, hair soaked from a squall, leaking through roof, gives one last bearing before her set, groans smoke. It's enough. Bearing lines cross over a bend in the river. The controller knows what to say. He says only, "Turn now. Now. Angels 4. Line astern. Break on my mark." He drags his last reserve as a threat and keeps it hidden, a knife under a table. Ghost raids, feints, ducted echoes, all paid for with fatigue and glass. Bombs begin to fall within earshot. The map shudders, lights flicker. Across gray water, the next wave forms with the confidence numbers give. Bombs fall near the sector station. The board shudders. Can control survive the next wave? Glass inhales, then rains across the map like sleet. Linen folds, chalk arcs smear, counters jitter to floor. The controller ducks, hand over mic, voice still flat. Stand by. Lamps flicker, mains stutter, headsets die for a breath. In the switch room, a WAAF slaps a diesel. The generator coughs, then settles into a growl. Map lights return, sickly but steady. Outside, sandbags bow. A masked silhouette stands indifferent. The spare cloth is unrolled, pins reseated. The raid keeps coming. The sector trunk in its trench is a charred bowstring. Teleprinters clack, then stall. A runner sprints to the fallback hut to cue buried wire. In Priory, girls in blue keep talking, assume nothing, Keep 2-minute time, make calls again to different exchanges. The net routes through a neighbor. Voices carry a half-beat delay. The controller tastes those lost seconds like petrol. Every order must anticipate that half-beat, or someone will turn onto air already empty. Across the water, the German leader feels the urge to press the bruise, to hit nodes, not wings. He peels a sliver west to pinch another gate, confident a cracked phone tree means thin resistance. His crews have learned the mask of water and the comfort of quantity. They'll ride glare and trust physics to blunt towers. He's right about physics. He's wrong about the number of hands pushing counters back in place. Chain home still draws tall echoes off a higher stream. Big bellies, slow cadence, confident returns. Chain home low begins to fill with splinters at sea's edge, an untidy fence of strokes that could be clutter or teeth. The WAAF at the low set works the height finder handwheel like a safe cracker. Lobe switching for the whisper that means metal in troughs. She calls it thin and uncertain, and she calls it now. The controller eats ambiguity and vectors a flight anyway, not to where planes are, but where angles will make them. Pilots lift into a battered sky with drilled grace. Gear up, sun 11 o'clock, VHF clean. Vector 340. Angels 1-5, then stack. He builds a 3-leg trap with minutes in height, 1 high to slash, 1 low to bait, 1 in pocket to pounce. Doubting's arithmetic becomes motion, preservation beats bravado. Caution pays ambush. Jamming returns as a veil, a moving lace speckling headsets with polite dirt. The Germans learned the band. Noise can look like weather on a scope and feel like fatigue. Operators tighten filters. The net refuses to hear what it doesn't need. Reports are timed, repeated once, cross-checked with stations not equally fooled. The brain refuses to be spooked. Ghosts appear and are thrown out. 2 red skeins thicken across Kent and Sussex, 2 clocks ticking. He can't be in both. He can't burn fuel for both. He chooses the Sussex thread higher because a heavy bomb over London writes in fire, and the Kent sea skimmers can still be taken low if cued precisely. Wrong and the river piers burn. Right and the high escort meets a wall of guns at their own level. On the floor, the plotter almost calls the wrong height. A smudged 12 becomes 21. She stops, checks, repeats exact digits. The raid drops back into true sky. A miss here at this hour sends men climbing into emptiness. The new cloth creases like an old shirt. She smooths it and pushes time forward with her rake. The high trap works like notes promised. Spitfires drop noses through thin cloud, and the first bomber sees something above that wasn't there a second ago. Now the call lands. They go in under glare that blinds below and masks above. The formation bends and survives by bending. Escorts come like a flick, late by 2 minutes the network banked. Near water, the net is patchy again. Sea is everything and nothing on a set built for height. Returns flatten, merge with surf. That seam is the Germans' favorite. The observer corps splice the picture. A man on a headland in a brown coat sees points sliding under sun and calls with accuracy born of boredom. Those calls were sneered at when towers were new. Today, they tie threads. Over Calais, the second wave forms on schedule. Fuel clocks sag into red. Bingo approaches regardless of valor. He can keep fighters 5 minutes more and risk losing them in fields not home, or he can rotate and open a gap at the worst moment. He chooses rotation. Losing a squadron to empty tanks is a wound you don't heal in a day. He banks on fresh scramble, clearing 10,000 in time and on masts, buying him 2 minutes he doesn't have. The Germans aim at nodes, not runways. Control buildings and aerials become targets. They are met by guns that were silent an hour ago. Beauforts unlimbered, Browning sighted because counters moved at dawn. Timing is hands hauling crates as much as airplanes turning. Air and ground mesh. That is the defense. Decoys roll with the second wave. ghosts heavy enough for the untrained. But weight has pace and geometry. Priory watches over time, not snapshots. A heavy raid can't pivot like a skater. A bluff can't keep mass. The head plotter calls decoys cold without bravado. She's watched this daily. Ignoring one group is an act of faith that is also proof. A warm lens bends returns. Ducting sends ghost raids over Hertfordshire. The board doubles like a reflection on rippled water. A younger controller might panic. Pilots would be forgiven. Priory calls stations behind the ghost line. They see nothing. The mirage fades. The real machines are over sea. At the edge, low fighter bombers use clutter as cloak. CH low will never be tall. Returns are messy and range short. It can whisper a heading. That is enough. A pair is vectored by bearing to the place. Whispers say, dots will break surf to hedge. They arrive with guns up as the enemy crosses telegraph poles. Low fights are fast and ugly. There is no tactic, but nerve. The intercept doesn't end the raid. It frays it and buys 3 minutes for guns inland to wind. Hours lengthen elastic. Raids and reforms, fuel in, fuel out, endurance turning into choreography. Ground crew chalk tallies under wings, then step back as new blips hatch. Spinners come back dented by debris, go out after petrol, and a glance under a cowl. No one is fresh. The system still is. That's the point of a net. A loop can hum when hands shake. The German leader adjusts in real time. He isn't made of cardboard. He sends a staffel to scratch at another sector station, hoping to break a branch to starve the trunk. He times radio noise to British climbs to cloud orders at decision points. Counters rise to meet this. Frequency discipline is baked in. You hear it in clipped calls, lack of chatter, one voice yielding to another. When hash bites, the controller drops to fallback frequency by rote. The order goes out on a line the jammer isn't touching. A lull comes that isn't generous. It's a breath before a final punch. The sun slides, the sea squints, scudding cloud streaks tin across sky. Returns get greasy. Sets do best in cold mornings, least when warm sea meets cooling land. They tighten picture to what matters. Ignore that smear, trust this one, and accept tolerances they hate. The WAAF calls altitudes with 1,000-foot honesty and keeps her voice level. Over the strait, the last push is a learned argument, a topping raid to pull fighters up, a low barbed run to punish any open door. He splits again. The high meets contrails and closing angles, taste of gun oil in vapor. The low aims where fuel is tight. He throws his pocket flight with a roll you only make after hours steering risk. There are no safe squares left. Men in posts, long ignored when scopes felt like kings, have their minute. Wave-top bombers are shadows in shelf light. They call 15, not 30. That number radiates through the web with trust earned earlier. The controller tweaks his pocket 2 degrees right and opens an intercept window wide enough to matter. It doesn't feel clean. Nothing at dusk does. Fighters appear where the enemy didn't expect them. Surprise keeps grass from turning cratered. London's guns mutter under afternoon. Near Biggin Hill, grass is scorched where a stick fell. A tepid tea has glass in it on a desk. Paperwork lies damp. A girl at the exchange wearing a helmet slides cords, although the room looks like it took a breath of heat. She cycles trunks by muscle memory, connecting Priory to field with grace no citation will mention. You hear doubting in what doesn't happen. He declines to hurl last reserve at a flashy ghost. He eats the insult of a few bombs falling badly placed because today the whole matters more than a part. He has been called cautious. Today, caution is altitude later. The enemy underestimates integration. He thinks nodes break faster than web can route around. He learns a lattice tightens when one line snaps. Twilight. The last German machine of the last wave turns home under pewter sky. The leader isn't ruined, he's bent out of his plan, and that is enough to dull his next line. He will come again, lower and later, and with teeth. The towers won't grow overnight. The WAAFs won't sleep long. But the net hums in a key it didn't know in June. The trick isn't seeing, it's deciding. Final vectors are not triumphal, they're functional. Fighters land with fuel in teaspoons, bump, roll to dispersal with engines coughing toward stop. Ground crew haul hoses in bluing light. Chalk taps a new line under a wing because someone asked how many. The board is rolled back on itself, a blood speck where a finger cut on glass, a fresh cloth pulled for dawn. Switchboard bulbs dim in rows until the generator is throttled down. The war doesn't stop when you rest your ear, so you don't. In huts by the coast, air tastes of hot bakelite and salt. Operators rest palms on benches to feel chassis hum. Tall masts cut a black comb against bruised sky. Night makes bands skip. Signals arc in odd parabolas to Luxembourg and back. Ghosts walk green traces like men in fog. The listeners have learned to call a ghost and a plane, fast. The system is a story told under pressure, a beginning in masts, a middle on the map, an ending in a voice saying, "Turn now." They have learned the edges of their net hard. Low skimmers still scare. Weather still lies. Jammers still make heads swim. Bombs still cut wires that felt like veins. The whole doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be better than panic. Today it was. The channel loses glitter and becomes a slab. In a hut lit like a ship, green traces crawl, patient as tide. Towers stand down the coast in immovable lines, guy wires singing in a wind no one on the bench feels. Inland, a plotting room's window is paneled again, a fresh sheet fitted into a frame blown an hour before. Night settles on quiet maps. The sea waits, the towers listen. The watchkeeper notes the next stand-to and reaches for the phone.